Awesome. And we're live with Aaron Jong, co-founder of Movr. Thanks for being here, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. This is sweet. Happy to chat with you.
Likewise. So Movr, what is it? What do you guys do? How did you get into it? For me, when I saw it originally, I was like, oh, this is kind of like Headspace, but for movement. And we all need a little bit more movement in our lives as we're working, as we're not working, etc. So I was excited to chat, but maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into what you guys do.
Sure. Yeah. I'll try and make my 25-minute intro a 2-minute one.
No, we have 30 plus minutes, so take your time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Movr is an app, straight up. It's Movr. People can download it in Android or iOS stores. We're in the exercise wellness health space, and I think what the most important thing for anybody listening, or anybody ever who comes into the app needs to know, is that we're about bettering your movement experience in your body as fast as possible. And that whole mission derives from my history as both an educator in the school system and a studio owner here in Vancouver for the better part of a decade. The last decade, and I've spent thousands of hours with one-on-one clients, thousands of hours in group sessions with group training. We did a lot of classes. I've facilitated instruction with personal trainers who worked at the studio. We had a staff that grew up to 20. And the thing that made us successful in the studio experience was we did assessments with everybody. We were always assessing movement. So we were saying, if we're going to improve how someone feels and moves, we've got to have some baseline metric of where their bodies are at and how it's moving on a functional spectrum. And then just pick the thing that we think is the most important to improve. And it can be very marginal, and it can have major increase in how someone feels in the moment and then long-term function in their body. So that was sort of my big, oh my gosh, this is my mission in the world. This is my experience in the studio that I'm gonna like dive into, is research as many ways as possible how does improvement happen on a physiological level, and then can we create a system that then allows that to happen on an exponential, scalable way. And that's when Movr became an idea 6 years ago. And at the time, 6 years ago, the things to do were to open more studios, start a YouTube channel. And fortunately for me, I didn't do any of those. I met my co-founder, who's still today the CTO of Movr. He was like, I think I could code this. I think I could code the way you think and the way you deliver exercise prescription in real life. And I mean, I could expand on then till now, but that mission from day one to now has remained true. We assess movement, we prescribe intelligent movement, and we improve how people move and feel in really short bits of time.
Amazing. So is it Tom? That's your co-founder?
Yeah.
No,
Tom works for, Tom is a mentor of ours who's been like imperative to the project. Co-founder is Brendan.
Okay. Because I was playing around with the app, and it's like, I think you get a little video of Tom in the corner, and it's like, hey, Tom is going to show you how to do that, right?
Sorry, Thomas. Yeah. That's one of the, he's one of the early partners on the project, shareholder, and he does all the communications and the education for people when they're in the app.
Oh, cool. Okay, so we'll get into that. Yeah. And then your co-founder is, what's his name? Brendan. How did you and Brendan meet?
So when I started thinking about what I wanted to do, I had this idea of an app, and I didn't know where to go with it. So I went on to Craigslist, I went on to Facebook, I went on to different places where I was posting. Somebody introduced me to a developer. I have an idea, I need to pitch it, and I had no idea where to turn. And then literally just like a friend of a friend of a friend saw my Facebook post and just sent me the phone number of this guy who I'd never met. And she's like, he's a friend of mine, he's a developer. I have no idea if he's what you need, but you should at least talk to him. He'll know who to send you to. And it was one of those moments where I had the phone number and I was sitting in my pajamas on a Sunday morning, and I gave him a call. and his girlfriend at the time lived around the corner from me. He was at our house. And he's like, I can meet you at a coffee shop in an hour. I was like, okay, let's do this. And then we went to this coffee shop, and 2 hours later we walked out. He had like, it was like crazy napkin scribbles. And that was the beginning, man. It was a very random experience. And we look back now, and I think there's nobody else that I could have partnered with that would have suited the role so perfectly. And likewise him with me, in terms of how we work, our skills that we have, and sort of the experience and the life we want to live in relation to helping people.
That's incredible. What are the chances? But that those types of stories, kind of can sometimes solidify in terms of like just thinking like, oh, this is meant to be.
Totally.
So where, it's been 6 years. Where was the product, and what was the product when you guys started doing this thing, and how has it evolved to what Movr is today?
It's a great question. And this is the stuff I love talking about. I think so at the very beginning, the big differentiator which we identified was that exercise is a spectrum of intensity or difficulty, or we use the word stress. And stress really is an indicator of how complex is something for our body to figure out how to do. So for an example, if I ask somebody to lie on their back and pull their knee to their chest, that's a really like low complexity exercise where you're still needing to flex at the hip. Your knee is going to go into flexion. You want to keep a neutral spine, stuff like that. Now, if I ask you to do the exact same thing standing up, you now need single leg stability. You need postural stability. You need to be able to flex with motor control rather than just passive stretch. And these are all things that I knew, and I was working with my clients, of going from the least complex to the most complex exercise. And I was saying, how do we find out where to put people exactly in the complexity spectrum of where they should be exercising? And when I looked out at the industry of exercise tech, studios, gyms, YouTube channels, like everywhere you looked, what you were being marketed is the most complex, hardest stuff you can possibly do. So the HIIT workouts, the sweaty like 6-pack ab promises, you're going in and you're saying, yeah, I want that outcome, but then I'm being delivered the hardest possible thing for my body. And I know from the thousands of hours of working with people one-on-one that people very rarely are capable of successfully completing that work without suffering from fatigue and exhaustion, injuries, tension and soreness, pain. How many times do you hear people like, oh, the burn, like my low back, or like, oh, I've been working out so hard, my shoulder and my neck are totally, I'm feeling this thing.
Even in yoga, it scares me. Like you go to like this hot yoga class, it's a beginner class, it's hot, it's sweaty, and you're doing these movements for the first time, and you can get injured in something that's supposed to like strengthen and create mobility.
Yeah. So early days, the very beginning, we were like, we have this spectrum of complexity. Can we create an intake that then itemizes and creates workouts that go from low complexity to higher complexity back to lower complexity? And that's just like basically your warm-up workout cool down. And then Brendan was able to build it, and that was a super exciting side project. We were just, we both had full-time jobs. It was a hobby. And then in 2016, I started training the chief science officer of Lululemon. He was a big mentor of mine at the time, and I was telling him about this engine that we'd created, and he was having this like, sort of revolutionary experience in his body one-on-one with me. And he's like, if you can take these assessments that you're doing with me and bring them into a digital experience, I and Lululemon have some strong interest in supporting what you're up to. And I was like, okay, this is revolutionary in terms of if this person's saying this and they've surveyed the whole landscape of digital sweat, we got to do it, right? So then we spent the better part of a year and a half looking at how do we create an assessment that's without a trainer, without sort of motion capture from a video, and then once we created that assessment, can we successfully match exercises that engage and improve those assessment scores when we find out the limiting factor? So if someone can't touch their toes, how do we then prescribe exercises that allow them to touch their toes? Someone can't squat, how do we then allow them to touch, or sorry, squat? If someone doesn't have core strength, how do we give them foundational core exercises so they can go into their day-to-day life feeling fantastic? And that was sort of like the middle years. We proved that we could, and then that led to some funding and some major funding that happened back in 2019. And then again this fall, we did another round this over the holidays, and we're now in a position where we have a product in the market. People can sign up for Movr. They can get prescribed minis, we call them, where you can come in and get things specifically made for your body. You can build workouts that have that foundational technology that we built, where it's the exercise complexity based on your body. You can choose mobility, you can build strength, you can use equipment. It really is like a platform where we're saying, we believe, based on the information you've told us, that we know how you should be moving your body in the best way possible. And we've got the sort of the usability data and the research to prove it.
So cool, and congrats on the milestones in the recent months and years. I'm curious, like, as you started 6 years ago and then today, there's been a huge influx of digital fitness apps and subscriptions, and obviously the pandemic also accentuated that in terms of like the move towards digital. As you see it, like the influx of companies into this space, and then you think about how Movr is differentiating itself as a product that, one, focuses on the assessments, and then two, prescribes movement. How do you maybe look at the competitive landscape and think about how you guys have differentiated yourselves and will continue to differentiate yourselves in the coming months and years?
I think that's a great question. I think we've been continuously asking ourselves that question. And I think for years, I've always stayed on top of looking at what are the most, like, the highest growth rate of sweat apps. And, meditation wasn't a big thing when we first came out. And now it's this massive, it's huge, like Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer. There are tremendously large players in the space where people are very, very aware of their mental health. They're, wanting to enhance their presence, their understanding and physical awareness of their body. And then there's been this massive influx of high intensity exercise. What I've always been watching is anyone using prescription or assessment based technology to then inform what somebody's getting. And that's been my sort of like my safety net for a long time. And as Nike and Apple Sweat and all these technologies continue to grow and have massive amounts of money to invest into their products, continue to evolve, I keep looking and I'm waiting for their intelligence to improve, and I haven't seen it yet. So, and I would say that my connections with the innovation space with Lululemon, they would agree, which puts us in a position where we're like, okay, we have something that we may not have forever as an outlier. And there are other technologies that do different forms of assessments, but we really believe in ours as being a leader in sort of the intelligence behind prescription. And where we're going today, I think, are two things that we're now being like, so how do we impact the market? What do we do with this now? Because building an end consumer product is going to be always an uphill battle against these behemoths that continue to have massive amounts of money and consumer base to market their products to. So we look to partnerships with platforms like JOON. We look at partnerships with, workplace benefits as a growing industry is a population where people are paying to feel better in new work environments with very diverse employee bases. Movr is made for diversity. It's made for multiple different body types. So we're looking at one, informing and being a part of this growth in the workplace benefit space, which excites me about this conversation.
Totally.
And then The other piece that we're looking at now is how does Movr, how does the engine that we've created, instead of us saying that we're going to be the platform that everyone comes to exercise with, how does Movr now inform other platforms exercise?
Yeah, I was
So
gonna ask about that.
yeah, and so what we're doing right now is we're playing with our algorithm and we're taking other platforms' content and we're informing, like, so it's kind of like reverse engineering what we originally did with Mover. We're saying what levels of complexity are the workouts happening at in the individual exercises. And say, John, you come in, you do your assessment in Mover, and you're like, I've got a Nike Training Club membership. I've got a, I don't know what else, a Santa Rebel. You've got some yoga pass and with some platform that you love. And we've plugged into all of their content and said, based on your assessment, here are the workouts within that platform that we think you should be doing. And I think that's going to be the future of Mover in a very larger scale way, saying we don't need to be the thing that creates the content all day, but we do want to inform more intelligent consumption of the content that you're playing with.
Yeah, it's super cool. Have you guys done anything with like, just riffing off the Lululemon connection with Mirror? And have you guys started working with their team to maybe inform any of their assessments and how they prescribe movement?
We haven't worked with the Mirror team directly, but we're working with the innovations department in partnership with some of the content that they've created. So we're doing some cool partnership stuff with them and hoping for some positive results. And maybe one day there's a Mirror thing that happens
Yeah.
that we could be excited about. But yeah, I think that partnership is exciting. And what we do know is that Mirror, like many other platforms, is growing in terms of popularity and use. And we think that what we're planning on doing with just general content that lives out in the space would be something that we could create that could be of use to them someday in the future.
Yeah, I love how you're thinking about external partnerships from employee benefits to like, partnering with an iconic consumer brand that really represents fitness and wellness and healthy living, like Lululemon. And then also how you're thinking about maybe like Mover as an API that exists within other products and apps in order to sort of inform what they're prescribing on the content side and on just like showing that you're making improvement. How do you guys think about, and I think about this a lot in terms of just like getting people that have downloaded the app to come back to the app, like day after day? In a world where there are so many apps, sometimes we just download something, try it once, and then, kind of forget about it at times. Like, how do you address that or think about that? And is it just like a volume game in terms of like thinking about conversion and who's actually going to stick around for the long run? Or yeah, can you speak to that a little bit?
I think that's the like $50 million question. I think one thing that's helpful is that some of the largest, most successful companies in this space have a 2% conversion rate to paid. So it's
Mm.
like they're out there spending massive amounts of money to get people into their products, and then they're successful or continuing to be able to fund based on a 2% conversion rate. So that kind of grounded us into sort of level setting our expectations so that when we turned on our subscription model, we weren't super demoralized right off the bat. I think when it comes to how do we get people to come back to our product, the thing that the two questions we're always, asking ourselves is does this help someone genuinely? Does the thing we're providing help someone? And our answer is always striving to be absolutely yes. And then B, we ask ourselves, would we use it? And I think that's what I think internally, there's been a number of iterations of Mover that internally our team never used it. We didn't think it was cool. We didn't think it was, like a nice user experience. Like, this is a fundamental flaw, team. Like, we've got to believe in our product if we want other people to use it. And I think the way we specifically do that in app, in Mover, is we are always working and driving our internal product roadmap to shorten the time between perceived or actual physical improvement of experience of physical improvement. There's a sentence in there. And sort of to clarify on that, what I mean is we want to measure functional movement improvement, or we just want to measure improvement of how your body feels. And if one or both of those things happen in a short amount of time, those are the users that keep coming back because they trust it. And it was the same with clients when I worked with them on the floor in the studio. If between the first and the third session, they had something happen where like, I haven't had back pain in 4 days, or I've never been able to do a plank without pain, or, I'm working out and doing squats and I can feel my abs. I think I'm getting stronger. Like those types of experiences, they fundamentally made that person then say, I'm going to trust the rest of the stuff that this guy or this gym or this trainer from this gym have to say. And we saw those people stick around for a long time. So, I mean, that's the product evolution. Is originally when Movr launched, our user experience is really bad. And people who were stuck around, we were like, why are they here still? And they had discovered their own physical improvement. And they're like, it's worth, the bugs, and it's worth the, dead end in this user flow that we, took time to figure out. And so that's where we're always, aiming and striving to improve is making that experience as fast as possible and as meaningful as possible.
And then as you think about, maybe your own journey and how you've come from the in-person world to the digital environment, and then thinking about Movr and movement as a category as it is today and in the future, how do you think about like striking the right balance between seeing someone in person as a personal trainer, or going and taking these digital classes, and then also having Movr in your back pocket as this like additional form of up-leveling and education? How do you think about how people will continue to balance those two things in the coming years?
And these are some great questions, John. This is great. I think number one, we're building Movr to be a supplement to your day-to-day life. I think the same way that you would use meditation but wouldn't stop going to a yoga class.
Yeah.
We're looking at we think that if you spend 5 to 10 minutes a day with Movr 5 times a week, so we're talking 25 minutes a week, we know through research and science, not usability testing, we know through published research that you will have a beneficial experience from a functional standpoint in your body. So I think that goes well beyond in-person or digital lifestyle evolutions that will happen due to pandemic or whatever sort of like societal new norms come about. But I also think that there's two types of people out there. And I think from my experience owning a studio that was open and bustling at 100% capacity when COVID hit, is that there was two types of people that impacted. One, there were people who were coming to the studio for the community. They were there for the people. They were there for the one-to-one connection with the trainer. The pandemic was really hard for them. It was like a total lifestyle change. And for a lot of people, we're looking at a lot of statistics where there's massive weight gain. There's mental health issues over the last year that we've not seen at scale the way we have ever. And I think that category of people who are more about one-to-one connection in person have had a really tough time finding healthy habits during the pandemic. And then the other half of people who were coming to my studio, they were like, oh, I was actually coming for the quality of the exercise. And those people have only flourished because now they're like, now I'm actually having a way more convenient time because I'm working out in my gym, on my deck, in my living room, when I want, when I have time. My commute is 2 minutes. I get coffee right before in my kitchen, and I'm still engaging with meaningful content. So I think as we move forward, there's going to be a component of society that continues to live in a hybrid state where they love the flexibility of digital. And I think we're going to see the other half, from at least my perspective, that are going to go back to in person. And I don't think Movr. I think Movr is a part of both those scenarios.
Yeah, I love that it's so simple and it's short and quick, and you could get value from it in just a few minutes. Like even this morning when I was taking the assessment, it was just like, it felt good to have to just even create that awareness, because that awareness, even if you do it for a couple minutes in the morning, just sticks with you throughout the rest of the day. And I think people really overcomplicate movement, and
Totally.
and a lot of it just comes down to like super simple stretches here and there, just to make sure that you're not creating too many cobwebs in your hip flexors or your lower back. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think it's like you said, that like we are here to demystify the exercise industry. You know, like I know that if you can't touch your toes, you shouldn't be loading up a heavy squat. So I'm not saying don't load up your squats. I'm saying I'm going to help you touch your toes, so that every time you go back to that, version of a squat, or the experience you have when you're like holding your kid in your arms, or when you're walking home from the grocery store and your shoulders bothering you, the things that we ask you to do in Mover, like you said with the assessment, they're relatively simple and they have huge impact on the day-to-day function of your life. So keep living, just add 5 minutes of something very intelligent for yourself, and I guarantee your physical experience will improve. And I say that to anyone whoever like asks me a lot of questions about, they're looking for verification that the app's going to work for them, and I'm like, just prove me wrong. Just go use it for a week, and if you come back in a week and you've actually used it and you're still feeling the exact same, then that's a different conversation. Maybe you need to go to a physiotherapist. Maybe you need to talk about some of the things that might be structurally happening in your body. But for 80% of us, the day-to-day aches and discomforts we experience, very solvable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Aaron, I'd love to switch gears a little bit at this point in the conversation. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into you and what drives you. And I thought maybe the best place to start was just around, how you even got into the movement space. Yeah, what were you thinking maybe coming out of college, and how has that evolved over time?
Yeah. I mean, it's a long road. I think, like, for me growing up, I was the chunky kid. I have three brothers. I was definitely considered the fat one in the family, and I loved sport. There was an element of being active always, but just out of just out of a pleasurable experience as a kid. So I was like, this is fun. Like, I feel very fortunate to have learned that exercise could be really fun and just part of, like, me and my friends would go play baseball after school. We'd go, I was on the track team, and I loved it. It was all just fun, grew up with a great set of like coaches and stuff. But really it was in high school when I was in PE, and I had this mentor of a teacher he just facilitated an exercise experience that was so engaging beyond the athletes in the class. It was really this accessible, fun, and safe space to be active and have fun. And I remember in like grade 10, I was like, I'm going to become a PE teacher. This guy's my idol, So I went to university to become a PE teacher. I did a 5-year degree in education. I loved it. I learned a ton about how the body and brain learns. And then while I was at school, my favorite activity courses were, I had to take a strength training course, and I had to do a whole bunch of biomechanics, physiology, pedagogy, how the brain works, how we learn the easiest and simplest way through actually doing. And at the same time, I got a job at the gym at the university. So I was, an unofficial strength trainer in the gym for 2 years. And one thing led to another. When I graduated, my now sister-in-law was a trainer here in Vancouver, and she was like, you should just challenge the personal training exam. Just get it. I've got tons of clients. I could throw you some clients. So I went and did that. And then the true turning point where I decided to move away from teaching was, I did a kettlebell certification with Agatsu, which is one of the two sort of larger kettlebell certification platforms or systems. And then I started looking at corrective exercise with the FMS systems. And they fundamentally just exploded my brain. I was like, okay, so there's a measurable system that allows us to correct the imbalances in our body because at that point I'd had like torn hamstrings. My soccer career was all over the place because, and I say career, but like, my amateur soccer participation, I was injured all the time. Um, and I was strength training, but very imbalanced. I was doing bench press and pull-ups when I was, running around. It wasn't balanced. And one thing led to another, and I kept going down this road and seeking more certifications in more anatomy based correction style exercise, along with training with kettlebells, which are a fundamentally balanced way to train your body. And I would say that took me about through to 2013, where I then decided to open up a gym because my client load was increasing. I had become a Lululemon ambassador because of the sort of the passion around a lot of the work I'd been doing. And then, from the gym onwards to Movr, that's what all happened. So, just kind of leaned in from my grade 10 dream of being a PE teacher, and here I am, trying to
Yeah,
scale out some of these systems.
it's really cool. It's not a story that you hear a lot. Like none of my PE teachers growing up are building companies with Lululemon by their side. So but also like, growing up as someone who has loved to move and has been a somewhat athletic, PE was, it's, as you think about like just being a kid and growing up, it's like PE should be half of the day, I think, in
Totally.
terms of just like learning how to move for longevity.
Yeah. I think too,
Yeah.
one of the things that I really took away was when I was in university, I had to go do a practicum experience, and I was in the gym, and it was like I couldn't really land on what was bothering me. But I was watching these teachers facilitate these activities, and I'd just been learning about how to like teaching games for understanding and big motor learning patterns and making things fun and getting everybody to be involved. And then I'm in these classes watching, and there's 5 kids being very successful and 25 kids having a tremendously low motivated time, either not participating, they're not showing up with gym gear, they're like, on their phones in the corner gossiping, all behaviors that would just show there's other priorities. And I'm like, I want those 25 to have the experience I did. And then what was interesting is coming into the exercise industry, it's the same scale. I was looking at all the products that exist in terms of the digital sweat category, and they're made for the top 5%. So it's like
Yeah.
if you're fit and active, and you know how to move your body, any of the platforms that exist are probably pretty good for you. And I'd say the majority of our population is unfit, don't have body awareness. They need to start learning just to move simply and in an accessible way that they say, you know what, that's pretty fun and it feels good. So the same problems of wanting to work with the 25 kids in the class that weren't participating is the same thing I'm trying to achieve today.
Yeah, and as I've gotten deeper into movement, I think for me personally, like you kind of crave new forms of exercise. Whether it's like, I've gotten to a certain point with yoga, not to say I stopped doing it, but now I'm like craving trying to learn how to rock climb or surf or do jujitsu. I'm curious for someone who you're like yourself, who's a movement aficionado, like how has your own movement practice evolved over the years? What does it look like today? How regimented is it versus how sort of just like intuitive and laid back? Does that change from a day-to-day basis? Maybe like during the week, you're more regimented, or the weekend, you're a little bit more chill. What does it look like for you today?
That's I keep saying great question. I love your questions, John. This is all stuff that I love talking about. It's been quite an evolution, man. I think I went through a period of time from, age 13 to 20 where strength training was not a priority. And in that time, I was playing very competitive basketball and soccer and suffering injuries from both of them all the time, and not realizing that it wasn't for a lack of athleticism. It was primarily a lack of balance. And then when I was 21, I partially tore a hamstring in a soccer game, and I fortunately was working in the athletic therapy clinic at the university that I went to. And the therapist was like, I'll treat you, but you have to listen to me. And I was like, okay. And she's like, you're shut down 3 months, no exercise. You're not going to soccer practice. You're not going for jogs. You're not going for hard bike rides. You can do golf, which is walking, and you can do like, you can go for walks and you can go to the beach. And I was like, okay, like, I'm going to listen to you, because I couldn't run. My leg was literally just hanging on for dear life. And then after 3 months, I went back in, and I mean, I saw her every week, and I went back in after 3 months. I'm like, okay, I'm done the 3 months. She's like, okay. She gave me 3 exercises. It's like, you're going to do these every day for 2 weeks. And so the 3 exercises were glute bridges, a form of neutral spine core work, and then standing split lunge. So she's like, you're going to balance your hips and you're going to build a stable core. And to this day, I have never had a hamstring problem again. I've never had a low back issue again. That's limited my performance in any of the activities I love to do. So I was like, okay, there's something around balanced training. I graduated university. I wanted to test everything. So for 4 months, a friend of mine and I, we did creatine and we lifted as heavy weights as we possibly could. I gained 40 pounds. I could bench press over 300 pounds.
Wow.
And then I went back to a soccer practice and almost like blew out my knees because my body was way too heavy. So it took a year to lose that weight, which was tremendously challenging. I, went back into the studio game. I started training with kettlebells. My body became balanced. I started playing like competitive soccer again. Lost a lot of weight, which was great, but then was, not really strength training at all, mostly just running, soccer, and I love cycling as well. And so I went for about like a 4-year stretch where I was training clients, but not really training myself. And then I went and did the Strong First Level 1 training, which is a kettlebell certification, which you need to do a number of very challenging repetitions of kettlebell exercises. So built a bunch of strengths back in 2017. Learned what it takes to train 4 or 5 times a week and push through various aches and pains to gain strength. And then that's when I was working in the gym. And I was like, what is going to be my way of just feeling good all the time? And that is now my baseline. Is I train to feel good all the time. Sometimes that's yoga. Sometimes that's, stretching 3 days in a row instead of doing any strength work. But my week right now, I love to ride my bike. I ride my bike to and from work. I have a Peloton. I love the Peloton cycling. The bike is great. I train with kettlebells 2 times a week where I'm just doing Turkish get-ups and I'm, doing cleans or squats or deadlifts or swings. And then my wife is a former competitive runner. So she loves to go for runs and we love hiking and stuff. So very much over the years, we built now, I don't really have a schedule, but I would say 6 out of 7 days a week we're either in the woods on my bike, moving weights, stretching. There's something every day.
Sounds amazing. You've inspired me. I have a 20-pound dumbbell here. Just
there you go, man.
Holding it, just playing around on my feet, like just kind of being a monkey man.
I remember like a couple of years ago, man, I walked down, I was living at my former girlfriend's house, and I walked downstairs at like 6:30 in the morning, and her dad at the time in his 60s, he's just in the living room. He'd moved the coffee table and he's doing crunches and push-ups. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm doing something, Aaron. And if I don't do something, like, I'm not going to do anything. And I remember like being like slapped in the face. I'm like, man, something's better than nothing. It was incredible. Yeah. So just building that lifestyle. And if you have anything, you can be active.
Totally. Yeah, it sounds like you're in your body a lot. And I think that's probably, as we think about even like mental health today, I think a lot of it comes to the fact that we're not in our bodies enough. But I'm curious to get into your mental models. Something I like to ask entrepreneurs is like, over the last 5 to 10 years, as you think about like what has contributed to your success and so forth, what is inherent, like an inherent skill or quality that you have Aaron? And then what is something that you've had to hone in or refine or work on um, over the years as you've become a better leader and entrepreneur in general?
Man. Um,
Sorry, I
oh
should
boy.
have
No,
maybe I
this
should
is
have
great.
prefaced my.
No, this is so good. I think something that has always come naturally to me is that if I feel passionate about something, um, there was just, whether it be from growing up with three brothers and being competitive, or you know, I it's hard to label exactly where it comes from, wanting to please our parents or whatever it was. I feel like if there's something that I believe in, I will do anything and everything to pursue that vision or that dream or that thing. And I think that is true with my relationship with my wife, with the studio, with Movr. There's many things that I'm passionate about that I just won't, relentless, and that's an inherent piece. And I think something that I've worked on tremendously and continue to work on today is like I think this year is my 10-year anniversary of just having professional help with having a therapist. 10 years ago, I was in a dark spot. I sought some mental health expertise and developed a relationship with a psychoanalyst who today like has fundamentally shape shifted the entire trajectory of my life and made me a more present person. And in that, the thing that I continue to work on is being able to own when I'm wrong, um, to be more authentic um, when I'm talking with people, to not talk over people, to ask more questions and talk less. But I mean, that's, as you can probably see, I love to talk. So um, there's been a lot of personal growth that's happened that time. But the thing is with that road is just not thinking that I know any better, and that it's always, always, always in my best interest to have a meaningful, facilitated conversation around mental health and my own.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
Lot in there that we could probably dive into over a bike ride
yeah, yeah.
when you're in LA or up in BC, Vancouver. I love to ride also. Aaron, this has been awesome. We're really stoked to be partnering with Movr. Congrats on all the progress and yeah, anything else you'd like to add before we sign off today?
I don't have anything to say except expressing gratitude. Very excited about what you are up to, and the partnership is one thing. And I think for anybody listening or anybody who sees Movr on your platform, my challenge is to prove us wrong. We really want to help, and we're here to help facilitate a more meaningful experience of your physical self. So go in there, check out the 5-minute minis, do your assessment, and know that anytime you reach out, there will be somebody from the Movr team or myself that will be there to chat. So that's my message. Prove me wrong.
Awesome, Aaron. Well, thank you for being here today, and we'll chat soon.
That sounds great, John. Take care, man.